My name is Emily Parker, and I'm 29 years old. Growing up, I was the older sister to Olivia, who was always just a little bit too much. Too beautiful, too talented, too charming. At least that's how it seemed. And I suppose I always knew that I was the one who would always come second. If I'm being honest with myself, I've spent most of my life living in her shadow. Olivia, my younger sister, was a whirlwind of attention and grace, sweeping through every room she entered like she owned the place. From the moment she was born when I was 5 years old, I understood what it felt like to be forgotten. The overwhelming adoration from our parents, the praise for her every move, every breath. It was always Olivia, Olivia, Olivia. It wasn't that I was neglected or unloved. It's just that Olivia was loved louder. From childhood, I learned to take a back seat, to accept that the world would always see her as the center of attention. She had the better clothes, the more elaborate birthday parties, and somehow she always managed to snag the last slice of cake, every single time. Looking back, I remember how my mother would praise her endlessly, saying things like, "Olivia is such an artistic child, just look at her paint." Meanwhile, I was busy trying to earn A's on my report cards, but all I ever got in return were mere nods of approval. "Good job, Emily," they'd say, but it was never the kind of praise that made you feel like you were special. By the time I was 15, the pattern had been set. Olivia was the golden child, the shining star. I wasn't resentful, at least not at first. I tried to remain happy for her, as a big sister should. But the truth was that every compliment and every accolade she received was another reminder that I wasn't the one they were looking at. Olivia never had to work hard for anything. If she wanted something, she'd just smile, bat her eyes, and it was handed to her on a silver platter. My parents were too caught up in praising her to notice that I was trying my hardest to stand out. I often felt invisible, a background character in her story. The more I tried to shine, the further Olivia would pull me into the shadows. When I got my first job at a local coffee shop, Olivia somehow managed to land a position at the upscale boutique down the street, and I could see how proud my parents were of her, always boasting about how she was already so mature for her age. In contrast, I was just Emily, the dependable one. But the worst was yet to come. The worst came during high school when I made it into the school play. It was my chance to shine, to finally be recognized for my talents. Olivia, of course, couldn't stand the idea of me getting the spotlight. Within days, she was suddenly interested in theater and talked my parents into enrolling her in acting classes. And just like that, she was cast as the lead in the next school play, overshadowing me once again. "Why can't you just share, Emily?" my parents would say, repeating the mantra they'd used on me all my life. The problem was I didn't have anything left to share. Olivia had taken it all: my confidence, my sense of belonging, my ability to stand out. She didn't have to work for any of it, but she still managed to make it hers. By the time I graduated high school, I was exhausted. I had kept my head down, done the right things, and stayed out of trouble. But Olivia? She had the world at her feet. It felt like she was always the one making headlines. And so, when college came around, I finally saw my escape. I moved 3,000 miles away to UCLA, a school far enough away from my family that Olivia's constant shadow couldn't follow me. For the first time, I was free. No longer was I just the background character in Olivia's life. I was going to be something more. The first year of college was a breath of fresh air. I met people who truly appreciated me for who I was. No comparison to Olivia. No expectations to follow in her footsteps. I could finally be my own person, without her outshining me at every turn. That's when I met Daniel. Daniel Foster walked into my marketing class on the first day of sophomore year, his tousled brown hair and boyish grin drawing my attention immediately. He was charming, funny, and just a little bit awkward, dropping coffee on my notes during the first conversation we ever had. Instead of being annoyed, I found it endearing. His nervousness around me made him even more attractive. When he offered to buy me dinner to make up for spilling coffee all over my notes, I didn't hesitate. I had never met someone who made me feel seen in the way Daniel did. We talked for hours that night, discussing everything from our childhoods to our favorite books, and I felt something click between us, something I had never felt before. "You're the first person I've ever met who really gets me," Daniel said, his voice soft. That was when I realized I was falling for him. Our relationship bloomed over the next 2 years. Daniel was different from any guy I had ever known. He was caring, attentive, and ambitious. But unlike other guys I dated, he didn't let his ambition cloud his judgment. He respected me and treated me as an equal. In my junior year, Daniel proposed to me by the beach on a cold winter morning, promising me a lifetime of happiness. And I believed him. We moved into a small apartment after graduation, and soon after, we both got our first real jobs. Our life was going according to plan, and for the first time, I felt like I had everything I had ever wanted. And then came the wedding planning. I should have known something was off when Olivia started showing more interest in my wedding than I had ever expected. It was supposed to be my day, but she seemed determined to take the spotlight in every conversation. "I can't wait to see what dress I'll wear for the wedding, Emily," she said to me one day, as if the event were already about her. My mom insisted that Olivia be my maid of honor, even though I had some reservations. She claimed it would break her heart if I didn't ask her. I never knew why, but for some reason, I always felt guilty for not being able to give Olivia everything she wanted. I should have known better. I should have known that this would never be just my special day. At my bridal shower, Olivia showed up wearing a white dress. She claimed it was the only dress she had, but I knew better. It was as if she wanted to remind everyone that she, too, could be the bride if she wanted to be. Still, I brushed it off. I wasn't going to let her ruin this for me, but deep down I knew things wouldn't go smoothly. I just didn't know how bad it would get. As the months passed, the wedding planning became a whirlwind. I had hoped it would bring some semblance of peace between Olivia and me, that perhaps the excitement of the event would allow us to temporarily put aside our differences. But, as always, Olivia found ways to insert herself into everything. From picking out her own maid of honor dress, which was unsurprisingly white, to suggesting the decor and venue choices, it felt like the entire wedding was slowly being overtaken by her presence. Looking back, I should have known that no matter how hard I tried, Olivia wouldn't let me have this one thing, this one event, where I was supposed to be the center of attention. I spent countless hours making sure every detail of the wedding was perfect. Daniel was on board with everything, even when I doubted myself. But I knew that something was off. He had been distant lately. He'd come home later from work, and when I tried to ask him what was going on, he'd brush it off, saying it was just the stress of the promotion he'd recently gotten. I had hoped things would go back to normal once the wedding was behind us, but in the back of my mind, I could feel the growing distance between us. The wedding day itself was a blur. It was beautiful, no doubt. Outdoor ceremony by the lake, my best friends by my side, and Daniel waiting for me at the altar with a smile that took my breath away. But the moment I stepped into that church, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way Olivia lingered a little too long during the photos. Maybe it was how her voice cracked during the toast, as if she was drawing more attention to herself than to me. Still, I tried to focus on the joy of the moment, on the man I was marrying. After all, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But in the months after the wedding, the cracks in my marriage started to widen. Daniel became even more withdrawn, spending more time at work, constantly making excuses to avoid intimacy. We had promised each other that we'd focus on our careers first and wait to have children until we were financially stable. But now, it felt like there was something else going on, something I couldn't put my finger on. At first, I convinced myself it was just the stress of starting a new life together. But the doubts began to grow as I noticed things I hadn't before. His phone was always face down when he was around me, and he became unnervingly protective of it. I caught him deleting messages more than once when I walked into the room. When I asked about it, he would say, "It's just work stuff, Emily." But something in his voice told me he wasn't being honest. And then there were the late nights. I tried to push it to the back of my mind. He was working harder, he was busy. But one day, I checked his phone bill, only to find that he had been making frequent calls to an unknown number. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I decided to brush it off, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The final straw came when I smelled a perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. It wasn't one I'd ever worn, but it smelled familiar, too familiar. I'd seen that perfume before. It was Olivia's. The pieces began to fall into place. Olivia and Daniel had always had an odd dynamic, too friendly, too close, but I never suspected it could go this far. How could they betray me like this? How could Daniel, the man I loved, the man I trusted, be capable of something so cruel? As my 29th birthday approached, I thought it might be the turning point. Perhaps this would be the moment that would bring us back together. I had worked so hard to make the day special, to dress up for him, to rekindle the flame that had grown dim. I picked out the blue dress Daniel had always said made my eyes pop and styled my hair the way he liked it. I told myself that everything would be fine, that the distance would disappear, and that we could finally reconnect. The night of my birthday dinner arrived, and I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. My parents had organized the dinner at Merlot, my favorite restaurant. It was supposed to be a celebration, a moment for the family to gather and honor me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When I arrived at the restaurant, the warm amber lighting and the familiar scent of fresh bread and rosemary did nothing to calm my nerves. The hostess greeted me with a smile, and I was led to the table where my parents were already seated. My mother, as always, was quick to compliment me, saying, "You look lovely, Emily, but I think you should touch up your lipstick before the photos." Typical. I hadn't even sat down yet, and she was already finding something to improve about me. But I smiled politely, brushing off the critique. After all, this was supposed to be a celebration. Olivia hadn't arrived yet, but I wasn't surprised. She always made an entrance, always ensured she had everyone's attention when she finally walked in. My parents exchanged glances as I took my seat, and I explained that Daniel was running late due to work. "Busy man," my father said with a proud smile. "You know, Emily, your husband is a hard worker. He'll be here soon." I nodded, trying to ignore the pit in my stomach. I checked my phone for a message from Daniel, but there was nothing. Just then, Olivia walked in, and I couldn't help but notice how she immediately commanded attention. She was dressed in a tight red dress that left little to the imagination, and as usual, she made sure everyone knew she had arrived. But what made my heart stop wasn't just her entrance. It was who was walking behind her. Daniel, my husband. He was holding the door open for her, his hand lightly touching her back as they walked through the restaurant. It was too intimate, too familiar. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I watched in stunned silence as they made their way to the table, Olivia kissing my cheek with a practiced precision that left no lipstick mark. She leaned in, saying, "Sorry we're late. Ran into Daniel in the parking lot." My heart pounded in my chest as I took my seat, trying to act as though nothing was wrong. Daniel sat down beside me, offering me a weak smile. "Happy birthday, Emily. Sorry about the delay." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "No problem," I said, though my insides were in turmoil. I couldn't understand why he was acting this way, why he seemed so distant. I could smell the perfume on his shirt again, but this time it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a deliberate slap in the face. As dinner progressed, the conversation drifted around to small talk. My parents were discussing their recent cruise, and Olivia was talking about her latest sales triumphs and the celebrities she'd met at a recent conference. Meanwhile, Daniel remained oddly quiet, only speaking when directly addressed. It felt like we were strangers at a table, not a married couple sitting together. Beneath the table, I reached out to touch Daniel's knee, hoping for some form of connection, some sign that things would be okay. But instead of warmth, I felt his body stiffen. His eyes flickered nervously as he placed his hand over mine, but it felt cold. The spark that had once been there seemed to have vanished completely. "Everything okay?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yeah," Daniel replied quickly, almost too quickly. "Just tired. It's been a long day." The waiter came by to take our orders, and as we placed our meal choices, I felt a heavy silence settle over the table. The gifts came next. My parents handed me a gift card to a department store. Nothing personal, just a gesture. Daniel gave me a small box with diamond earrings that, while beautiful, felt impersonal. And then there was Olivia's gift, a designer scarf in a shade of orange that I would never wear. "It's exactly your color, Emily," she insisted, though I knew she had bought it for herself and had just decided to gift it to me at the last minute. I was trying to hold it together when the waiter brought out the dessert, a chocolate lava cake I had requested instead of the traditional birthday cake. As he placed it in front of me, my father raised his glass for a toast. "To my oldest daughter," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've always been so responsible, Emily. Your mother and I are so proud of the life you've built." Responsible. That was all I was ever known for. Not exciting, not impressive, just dependable. My heart sank, but I smiled and nodded. Then, just as we were about to cut the cake, Olivia stood up and announced, "Actually, I have an announcement to make. I think it would be the perfect addition to Emily's birthday celebration." I felt my stomach drop. Something was wrong. I could see it in Olivia's eyes. She was about to drop a bomb. All eyes turned to her as she rubbed her stomach, her face glowing with a false sense of triumph. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice ringing out across the table. The shock was overwhelming. The words barely registered in my brain as my mother gasped in delight, and my father grinned broadly. Olivia turned to Daniel, her hand still on her stomach. "And Daniel is the father." Time seemed to freeze as I looked at Daniel. His face was pale, his eyes darting between Olivia and me. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. And then Olivia dropped the final bombshell. "We've been seeing each other for months.